we may be a ways off from Mass Effect 5. If we get a Mass Effect 5, given all of the chaos and turmoil around EA, their sale, they're going private, and everything going on with how they've laid off basically everybody. Shit, okay, well, I didn't want to start with this much negativity. Let's go there, but there's good news. In the meantime, we have two excellent Mass Effect-like games on the cusp of being in our hands. One of them as soon as next year, 2026, and they're coming from veteran RPG teams who have former devs from or have been deeply inspired by Mass Effect over the years. These two games are Exodus by Archetype Entertainment, a new studio full of former Mass Effect devs and writers that looks like a game that copied Mass Effect's homework. In a good way. I'm saying this as a compliment. And then there's The Expanse, Osiris Reborn from Alcat, a legendary RPG studio known for their incredible CRPGs, who are branching off into a new exciting direction with this existing IP third-person RPG that is very obviously heavily inspired by Mass Effect, but probably darker, less sci-fi fantasy, and more hard science fiction with a whole lot of goodness. Fantasy is my home. It is my bread and butter. That blanket that my cat is sleeping on is literally from the Lord of the Rings. Hell, I write books in fantasy because sci-fi to me is, well, you know what? I failed pretty much every science class I was ever in, and physics might as well be fucking magic to me. But that doesn't mean I can't really enjoy and appreciate a good sci-fi game as long as it's not Starfield. Maybe I'll try the Star Wars mod. I've been growing increasingly excited about these two games, in part largely because of how much choice it sounds like you're gonna have in both of them and how much impact you'll be able to have in the game as you play, for good and for ill. More on that in a bit. And because these games are going to be kind of synonymous with each other for a while, I wanted to do a brief overview, not super in-depth here, but a brief overview of the similarities and the differences of these games that we know so far. First, let's get the nitty-gritty out of the way. Release dates. We will be seeing Exodus at the Game Awards in 2025, and there is a planned release date of 2026. So this one's literally right around the corner. We'll be talking to sentient space frogs and running from this thing in no time.
Do you know what fear is? The Mariama do. They thrive on it. These monstrous celestials haunt the darkest corners of the cluster, hunting for isolated targets. And, unfortunately for their victims, the Mariama are interested in more than just stealing cargo. They want minds, memories, emotions. The more twisted and tortured, the better. Captured prey will be subjected to intense psychological torment before being neurologically drained. Those rare few who the Mariama allowed to survive and escape often never return to space, for they know too well the terror that lurks out there in the dark, between the stars.
Osiris Reborn is less certain. No release date has been announced just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see it until 2027 or 2028. So a bit longer of a wait for that one. So if you're like me and you still want to catch up on The Expanse and get yourself familiarized with it, you have time. You can go watch the TV series or you can go read the books. I plan on doing both. Both are looking at multi-platform releases on PC and consoles. Both are heavily inspired by Mass Effect, including the use of companions with two there to assist you most of the time. Both games will let you pick your gender. Both games are going to be third-person shooter RPGs that are mission-based more than open world, so more Mass Effect than Starfield. Thank fuck, I promise that's the last time that I take a shot at Starfield. I'm sorry, it just bored me. If you love the game, amazing. I'm so happy for you. I just didn't. Both games will be heavily choice-driven, including how you choose to interact with your companions, and both games have potentially very dark sci-fi settings and consequences. There's a lot more I could go into here, but I'm trying to keep this a bit more of an overview, and they'll do a deep dive on the games individually later, but let's talk about a couple of the key differences. The first and most obvious difference is that Osiris Reborn is being built off an existing IP, while Exodus is trying hard to make a new one. The Expanse might not be the largest IP in the world, but it will instantly have more recognition from the get-go than Exodus. But the difference goes beyond the IP. The studios themselves are in a similar state. Owlcat, over the years, has proven to be a fantastic RPG studio, even if this will be diverging from their usual weighty and extensive CRPG fare into a more action-oriented sci-fi RPG. Archetype, while being made up of industry veterans, is brand new. Exodus will be their first game. In both of these situations, it brings up questions for different reasons. It doesn't matter what devs made at other studios because Archetype itself has not made anything. Owlcat is established and the Expanse is an established IP, but Owlcat hasn't made a game like this before. And the way the IP is situated, the game will be taking place with future events already written, taking place amidst the first 2 books of the series and the first 2.5 seasons. Exodus, on the other hand, is far looser in its interpretation of events, given that it's a brand new IP. But new IPs are often a hard sell. You need to hook someone from uncertainty. They may have more flexibility than picking up a beloved IP that has hard-written rules and expectations over years or decades, but sometimes no expectations can be more daunting. To that end, Exodus has released 1 book with a sequel on the way to get people familiar with the world, and that actually brings us to our next point. If you look at kind of a continuum of sci-fi where like over here you have Star Wars and the sci-fi fantasy, basically fantasy books in space, and then you look over here you have hard sci-fi like The Martian, which is the one where I would get confused at the wording. That's a very personal way to look at it, but that's basically hard sci-fi and fantasy sci-fi. If you look at that continuum, I kind of would put Mass Effect kind of closer on this side to the sci-fi fantasy. Even though it has a lot of really hard science-y ficty things in it, it's very obviously going to be leaning into stuff like the biotics and all those kind of things. But then also with these 2 games, I kind of feel like they're also closer, at least Exodus is closer to that fantasy sci-fi thing, even though we're dealing with time travel and all these kind of things. Whereas Expanse and Osiris Reborn is inching closer to the more hard sci-fi a bit. So kind of just a little general idea of where these 2 games are sitting on this continuum, although it could obviously be argued. I do think though that both of these games will be a little bit less sci-fi fantasy than Mass Effect. And one of the reasons why is there's no Liara. In these games, we don't have extraterrestrial aliens, at least not in the in-your-face way that Mass Effect did. No Rex, no Liara here. In fact, Exodus has been very clear that even though you're going to be encountering some weird-ass shit out there, they're all descendants of terrestrial life. They're your grandkids that got magic powers. And this is all even with weird space tech and biotics like sort of magic in Exodus. Exodus gets around all of this and has room to play and make things like those creepy Maruyama shown earlier. These guys, because I want to scar you again. Well, it does so with time dilation. It does so by having the ability to have this idea of what happens to human things or animals when you evolve over 40,000 years in the future. What's going to happen to the human race at that point? That's kind of where we're going. And that's a central theme that makes it a little bit different when you compare it to The Expanse, time dilation. So let's talk about that as the major difference. The central theme to all of Exodus revolves around this time dilation. It's the connective tissue for how terrestrial life forms have evolved in so many vastly different ways, and it's core to your character as a time traveler. You will travel through time in a mission-based system and alter things and try not to fuck everything up, like the butterfly effect. It will touch on everything. Your decisions will have consequences for the loved ones you leave back home. Progression options for your character, even your home world and your civilization will be impacted by those choices, which honestly makes me think a lot of this really interesting novel called Dark Matter, which had all these different, like, basically world states. And it makes me wonder if Exodus would be something similar. Make a bad decision or a good decision and see the results play out in your civilization in ways you may not have intended. It's also central to the entire setting, because the core concept is that all the ships have left Earth, but they have arrived at different times, hence the name Exodus. Some ships may have arrived tens of thousands of years before you do, for example, creating a stratified society on different evolutionary milestones with the Celestials on top. The last game I played that meddled with time was Last Epoch, and while it was fine, it was a bit more of a gimmick than anything, since you didn't really have the agency to make changes. If Exodus can pull this off, I think it's going to be pretty awesome to engage with. Osiris isn't going to be dealing with that at all. Everything's going to be a bit more grounded, a bit more, I would suggest, human, a bit more, well, people are shit kind of thing, I think. You see, Osiris might not have talking bears or frogs from the future, but it might still be more devastating than Exodus in this, despite these long-term decisions being a key Exodus feature. In a write-up from Polygon where they played a demo version of the game, they made a decision that ended up having devastating consequences, deadly, fatal consequences for a whole shit ton of people. I won't say exactly what happened because it seemed like the demo is directly from the game, but if you want the kind of the full details, the spoiler included details, I've linked the Polygon article below. Osiris might not have these century-spanning decisions making of Exodus, but it certainly sounds like the choices you make are going to be extremely impactful and potentially devastating. What was described here actually reminded me of Baldur's Gate 3 and how you could potentially make a tremendous issue by your decision making. How you could mess up and actually cause a damn massacre at the Last Light Inn if you failed to save someone. Not that I did that. Not that I was like, you know, like so sad and like, holy shit, Larry, why would Larian do this? Like, just so many people died in such horrible, horrible ways. And I was just like, you know, no way, not that, you know, and then you find out later that no, that's not an actual part of the game. And maybe you could have actually saved those people that you watch get mutilated and die. You find that out from your friend who didn't experience that. Didn't do that though. Wasn't me. It's avoidable, and I fucked up and like 30 people died. Anyway, let's talk about companions. Companions are going to be a key part of any RPG that's going to be emulating Mass Effect. And while there are still some questions with both games on how exactly they'll work, we do have some tantalizing details. In Osiris, you can have two companions with you. You can direct them, but it doesn't sound like you'd directly play them. More Mass Effect, less Dragon Age Origins. One of the key things though that Alcat has said is that when trying to do companions right, they're trying to make sure that even the ones that are not with you are still involved. You'll be getting their help, you'll be talking to them over comms, and they'll even play some roles in missions. This is a breath of fresh air and a welcome addition and expansion on something I loved in Expedition 33 recently. You didn't just tell your companions to go ride the bench at home and forget that they existed. They were involved in dialogues, even in fights. They came in as reinforcements when you died. To hear that Alcat is considering this long-standing companion RPG problem is music to my ears. It always feels like, based on how you have to level up companions and everything like that, you end up picking a couple and you lose out on all of this other part of the game with these other companions. So I like that they're thinking that through with Osiris Reborn. Exodus, on the other hand, looks to be more traditional in the sense that, as mentioned, with time dilation, you will be benching people. However, you will have a core group of companions that will always travel with you, avoiding those lasting effects of time dilation, so you won't accidentally leave your potential romantic interests at home only to come back and find out they're just a bunch of bones. And despite how crazy we get sometimes in RPGs, that is probably still off limits. I'm gonna get demonetized for that. The companions will also be a diverse group of companions, including plenty of non-human ones. Each companion will have their own motivations, personality, and stories. We also know that romance will be included, but we're not sure yet on the depth or breadth, but hopefully it can come somewhat close to what it was in Mass Effect, given who is writing the game and who is making the game. I wasn't able to find many details about how the companions will work in combat.
Now that we're all best of friends, let's make each other rich.
What can we expect from the companions? Is it going to be the kind of thing where there's a couple people with us, or are we going to have like a team? And how far are you guys really wanting to go with that?
Well, you have a team. You don't bring your entire team on every mission. You have 2 team members with you on every mission, and your companions, you're going to be able to do a lot with them. You know, you will have a relationship with every single one of your companions. You're going to be able to romance some of your companions. You're going to have, your companions are sometimes going to be at each other's throats as the story progresses. You know, you're going to be choosing to follow some companions' advice over the others, and that might, you know, rupture your relationship with those that you didn't side with. And your decisions are going to have huge impact. So there'll be, there's a lot of relationship stuff there that's going to happen that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, and the slate of them overall, we think is really going to be compelling. We've introduced 2 that you can see on our website. And if you look closely at the trailer, you'll get a glimpse of a few more. But there's more to come. And not to be the constant tease, but ultimately that set of things that we have available in this universe to deliver through the characters and through the companions specifically that you'll play with, we think is pretty cool. And it's a nice part of the IP.
Also, some of the companions change radically depending upon some of the choices you make. It's because with time dilation, we can just, if you leave a companion behind, imagine all the changes that they can go through while you're gone. For them, it might be a decade, which also makes the artist crazy, because it's like they have to like, okay, so we just can't do this companion. We have to do the companion 10 years older. Oh, and maybe even older. So
many thanks again for your help.
You should have been honest.
But I think the safest bet is to assume they'll work pretty similar to Mass Effect, given James Olin is behind this game, and go out from there. Hopefully in the coming months, like maybe shortly after the Game Awards, we'll actually get more of an in-depth view of how the combat is going to work in the game with companions. Or maybe even a demo. I can hope, right? We could be looking at eating very well as fans of Mass Effect over the next few years with Exodus, Osiris, and then hopefully Mass Effect 5. I have the most questions about Exodus given it's coming from a completely new studio, but they're going all out to build out this world. It's also obviously the one we're gonna get our hands on first. Stay tuned to the Game Awards to see what info we get on Exodus. I kinda hope they don't bring out Matthew McConaughey again. Bring out James Olin, something, let the game speak for itself, but hopefully we get some more information and it's not just like kind of a repeat of the trailer we've seen before. But if you're interested in Exodus specifically and you want to dig a little bit deeper into that game, I covered it in more depth in this video right here. My name is Edward Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an excellent day, and I cannot wait to join these games with you and see if they're as good as they look.